Red Bull and Ferrari want Formula One's rulemakers to discuss how crash damage should be accounted for in an era of budget caps and restrictions on engine components. Both teams ended the first half of the 2021 season facing big repair bills and grid penalties because of accidents caused by other drivers. So are they right to suggest that F1's new financial regulations and existing rules around engine usage have flaws that need addressing? Or is this only an issue now because these big teams no longer have unlimited budgets that let them shrug such crashes off, leaving them in the same boat as everybody else? Well, it's a bit of both. And it's a very complicated issue, so we'd better get into it. Back-to-back expensive accidents for Red Bull, each at the hands of a driver from title rival Mercedes, have left the team critical of the impact crashes have in the new for 2021 budget cap restrictions. Red Bull estimated Max Verstappen's big Cops crash after being hit by Lewis Hamilton in the British Grand Prix cost the team $1.8 million. And at the next race in Hungary, both Verstappen and Sergio Perez sustained damage in a multi-car first corner collision caused by Valtteri Bottas. Meanwhile, Ferrari's Charles Leclerc was a blameless victim of Lance Stroll's error in another first corner crash at the Hungaroring when the Aston Martin driver locked up under braking and then slid into the side of the Ferrari while trying to take evasive action. The accident ended Leclerc's race immediately and caused a lot of damage, taking Ferrari's total for the season to around €2.5 million, while the post-race analysis at its Maranello factory also revealed terminal damage to the power unit. So why does this matter for two of F1's wealthiest teams? Because as of 2021, to bear unexpected financial burdens has a knock-on impact on the rest of their spending, given these teams now operate on a baseline $145 million spending limit. These teams plan their budget for the season with an estimated spend for accident damage and parts issues. Anything they have to spend unexpectedly in those areas will have to be taken from somewhere else. That explains why Red Bull team boss Christian Horner said, "It's hugely frustrating and brutal under the cost cap. It reaffirms that when you have an incident that isn't yours, you're paying a significant price for that. That's something that isn't budgeted for and is something that I think does need to be looked at in greater detail by the FIA." Unsurprisingly, Ferrari agrees in principle that teams shouldn't suffer financially because of crash damage caused by opponents. However, team principal Mattia Binotto believes this is not a matter of creating a budget cap exemption. Instead, he proposes that teams whose drivers are to blame for contact with another car should be responsible for picking up the bill. Binotto said, "If you're not guilty, having such damage in the budget cap is even more of a consequence now. Should we add exemptions? I'm not sure that's the solution. It may be very difficult to police. But I think that what we may consider is that if a driver is at fault, the team of the driver should pay the other teams for the damages and repairs. That will make the drivers more responsible." Okay, so the first thing we need to stress here is that of course losing money from your own budget cap because of crashes that weren't your fault is unfortunate and probably unfair. But what Red Bull and Ferrari are pushing for comes from an entirely selfish position. Outside of a budget cap world, would these teams be willing to cover the cost if one of their drivers wiped out a car from a cash-strapped smaller team? Of course they wouldn't. Those smaller teams have been tackling the problem of how to adjust their limited spending in light of major accidents for years. In fact, Haas is still doing that this season. The whole point of F1 switching to a budget cap is meant to even the playing field, because there are some baked-in advantages for the biggest teams that don't have anything to do with their successes. For a long time, they simply got more money because that was the deal they'd done with F1. If the rules are changed to allow crash damage exemptions in the budget cap, then it's just another part of the financial regulations that's geared towards the bigger teams, as there are already existing exemptions in place. So in the spirit of the budget cap and its intentions, why should one of Red Bull or Mercedes or Ferrari be permitted to spend more money to repair their cars when a team like Haas or Alfa Romeo would have the same permission but not the same means to do it? Few things happen in F1 for unselfish reasons though, so let's say that big teams looking after their own interests doesn't matter and it's decided that this is worth pursuing. How would it work? Establishing when a team would be allowed to cover costs outside the budget cap or when another team would have to pick up the bill could be quite easy. F1 could just use the stewards' verdicts. In Red Bull's recent cases, Hamilton was found predominantly to blame at Silverstone, while Bottas was apportioned full responsibility in Hungary. The amount of blame considered by the stewards could be used to determine when the exemption or the liability kicks in. But that puts an increased responsibility on the stewards who aren't insurance appraisers. And in any case, how would you work out what the spend really is? Red Bull claims the Silverstone crash suffered by Verstappen cost it almost $2 million, but who's going to verify that amount? Is Red Bull going to let the FIA inspect every single damaged component right down to the nuts and bolts? And does the FIA have the resources to commit to such undertakings, or would it be simply willing to hire a team of insurance assessors? Establishing when a team should be let off paying for crash damage within its cap, or when another team should be made to pay for it, is a very tricky path for F1 to go down. These important distinctions would be based on interpretation, and given it dictates financial accountability, it would almost certainly invite more legal angst. Teams would be minded to challenge decisions, appeal verdicts, or submit petitions to review because there would be much more at stake than just sporting penalties. And what happens if, let's say, Mick Schumacher did what Bottas or Stroll did in Hungary? He'd make a small but costly error, and because he's at the back of the grid, he'd likely skittle several more cars. He'd be labelled wholly to blame by the stewards, then Haas would have to pick up the bill for several damaged Formula 1 cars, something it simply can't afford. So it's the sort of idea that might seem right on paper, but can have all manner of unintended consequences in reality. The engine side is an equal part of Red Bull's and Ferrari's frustrations because both teams are now staring at likely grid penalties this season because of crashes they didn't cause. Drivers are restricted to 3 sets of major engine components in a season before automatic grid penalties are applied. In Hungary, Verstappen had to switch to his third power unit of the season after Honda found a crack in the engine that was previously in the car, including for his crash at Silverstone. Honda sent the cracked power unit to its Sakura base for analysis, but if it cannot be repaired and reused later this season, Verstappen is virtually guaranteed a grid penalty further down the road. Sergio Perez is also set for that fate after Red Bull said his engine lost all water and was terminally damaged in the Hungary pile-up. And Leclerc's Hungary engine will not be used again, which means he's set to switch to a third engine at the Belgian Grand Prix, and Ferrari has admitted it is highly likely he will need a fourth engine to help complete the remaining races that are scheduled for this season. Working out a fair system that lets a team use an extra engine if they lose one in an accident is a perfectly valid idea in principle, but making it work in practice is trickier. Some have suggested applying the same rule that works for gearboxes. So if a car doesn't finish the race, it gets a free change for the next Grand Prix. But the engines are more significant performance differentiators, so strategic retirements to bank a fresh engine are likely if someone isn't doing so well, and the whole point of restricting engine uses is to keep costs down. Letting a driver have a new engine isn't simply a like-for-like replacement, it creates an imbalance. If an engine that's 5 or 6 races into its life gets damaged, replacing it will bring benefits in reliability and possibly performance, and will be a big advantage in getting to the end of the season without penalty-inducing changes. It doesn't simply cancel out losing the engine that was in the car. It would also be open to interpretation in other key areas. Where do you draw the line at what counts as worth a free engine change? Teams would almost certainly push that as far as they could to try to get a free change, even if the engine damage wasn't actually terminal. A good case study would be Verstappen's engine from Silverstone. All the checks post-event indicated it was fine, so presumably that doesn't merit a free change after the crash. But then Honda found a crack after 4 sessions of running in Hungary, so would it be okay to change it then? And even if it's considered a near certainty that this was caused by the crash, how would Honda prove that it was 100% the case? All of that is why, unfair as it might seem to say, sometimes teams just have to accept that crashes are part of racing and they come with consequences, especially in an era of F1 that the teams have agreed needs to have strict spending limits. Sometimes a team will cause these accidents and sometimes it will be the innocent victim. This brutality of racing, as Horner called it, has been around forever. Accident damage and incidents caused by others are part of the occupational hazards of motor racing, just like injuries caused by an opponent are an unfortunate part of a sport like football. But let us know what you think in the comments section and share your suggestions for how F1 might incorporate crash damage exemptions into the budget cap, or make exceptions for drivers who lose terminally damaged engines in accidents they didn't cause. If you liked the video, we'd very much appreciate it if you could hit the thumbs up button to show it, and click subscribe if this is your first time here and you want to come back for more in the future.